Hello everyone. Today, we are traveling to a country that is talked about the most in the world, whose movies we watch and songs we listen to, but whose past is actually a bit blurry for many of us. The United States of America. Now, a question for you. Who discovered America? I can almost hear you say Christopher Columbus. But wait. When Columbus set foot on those lands in 1492, it wasn't a deserted island. Millions of Native Americans had already been living there for thousands of years, with their own cultures and civilizations. In fact, Columbus thought he had reached India and called them Indians. We could call this history's first major geographical misunderstanding. So what happened next? Europeans said, "This is a new world. Let's settle here." And that's exactly where it all began. Are you ready for that crazy story where tea was dumped into the sea? Brother fought brother, and which eventually reached all the way to the moon. Let's get started. It's the 1600s. The big brothers of Europe like England, France, and Spain entered a race to grab land from the American continent. The British, in particular, established 13 colonies on the East Coast. The people in these colonies were minding their own business, farming and trading. It's the 1600s. The big brothers of Europe like England, France, and Spain entered a race to grab land from the American continent. The British, in particular, established 13 colonies on the East Coast. The people in these colonies were minding their own business, farming and trading. The final straw was the tea tax. In 1773, a group of Americans disguised themselves as Native Americans, infiltrated British ships, and dumped tons of tea into Boston Harbor. They call this the Boston Tea Party. It might just be the most expensive tea party in history. After this event, ties were severed. An army was formed under the leadership of George Washington, and on July 4, 1776, the famous Declaration of Independence was signed. They were no longer British subjects, they were Americans. Of course, it took a war and years of conflict for the British to accept this, but they eventually gave up. Okay. They became independent. The country was established. But back then, America consisted only of the East Coast. They looked at the map and said, "Let's head west. There's massive empty land over there." That's how the famous Wild West era we watch in Hollywood movies began. People rushing west hoping to find gold, cowboys, the construction of railroads. But this expansion had a very dark price. Native Americans being driven from their own lands. The second major crisis erupted internally. By the mid-1800s, the country was literally torn in two, the North and the South. The North was industrialized. They had factories. The South, however, had massive cotton plantations, and millions of enslaved Africans were forced to work in these fields. When Abraham Lincoln was elected president, he wanted to stop the spread of slavery. Southerners were furious and declared their secession, saying, "We are starting our own country." The result? The American Civil War, which began in 1861 and is the bloodiest war in American history. Over 600,000 people died in this war, where brother fought brother. In the end, the North won. Slavery was officially abolished, and the country managed to stay together as a whole. Lincoln, however, was assassinated in a theater shortly after the war ended. After the Civil War, America healed its wounds quickly. Electricity, the telephone, cars. The Thomas Edisons and Henry Fords took the stage. The industry grew so fast that by the time the 20th century arrived, America was a giant that could no longer fit on its own continent. Then World War I broke out. At first, America said, "I won't get involved in Europe's fight," but towards the end, they entered the war and put their foot down. The post-war 1920s are known in America as the Roaring Twenties. Jazz music, dancing, cinema, incredible wealth. Everyone was making money from the stock market. But the party ended very badly in 1929. Wall Street crashed. The Great Depression, which affected the whole world, began. People lost everything overnight, and unemployment broke records. The economy didn't fully recover until World War II. Yes, yet another war. With the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, America officially entered World War II. As a result of this war, America ended the conflict by dropping atomic bombs on Japan, and also sent a very clear message to the world. I am the new superpower. World War II ended. But this time a new enemy was on the stage, the Soviet Union. We entered an era where guns didn't fire, but the two giants constantly flexed their muscles at each other. Namely, the Cold War. This era was truly bizarre. The war wasn't fought on the front lines, but in space. When the Russians sent the first human Yuri Gagarin into space, the Americans panicked. President Kennedy stepped up and said, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade." And they did. When Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon in 1969, it wasn't just a scientific victory. It was a victory of prestige won against the Russians. Was it just space? The 1960s and 70s were a complete cultural revolution in America. Black Americans marched for their civil rights under the leadership of Martin Luther King Jr. Vietnam War protests, the hippie movement, rock and roll legends. America began to influence the entire world, not just with its weapons, but with its music, Hollywood movies, and fashion. In the following years, the Soviet Union collapsed. The internet was invented. Silicon Valley was born, and smartphones entered our lives. Today, the United States of America is still one of the world's greatest powers with its massive economy, tech companies, and global influence. But we shouldn't forget, this country isn't just made of skyscrapers and Hollywood movies. Behind it all, there are the sweat and tears of exiled natives, enslaved people working in cotton fields, young people who died in the Civil War, and immigrants coming from all over the world hoping for a better life. History books only write about the winners, but real history is much more complex. What do you think about this very short but eventful history? Which era of American history surprised you the most? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Until our next journey, take care and goodbye.